Hello and welcome back to the channel. Something a bit different this week, and yeah, I'm not at the seaside, I'm not at the woodland, but I'm actually in my bedroom slash office. Haven't got out recently with a camera for a few different reasons, but I thought I'd do a bit of an editing video, but an editing video with a slight twist. So on the Thumbs Up Photography group that both myself, Steve, and well, Colin as well run, I submitted a poll. And that was basically 2 images from myself and 2 images from Steve. Both photos that we hadn't actually edited. Now we went through the different photos. I submitted 2, as I say, one which was the lone tree at Melon Cove, and one which was a sort of hut just next to the boulder stone, just south of Derwentwater. And Steve submitted 2 other photos. You got this lovely oak tree at Cannock Chase in the mist, and also this this boat at Fairbourne. Near Caderidris. So I ran the poll for a few days, and the group had chose my photo of the hut just next to the boulder stone. So yeah, I want to talk you a bit through my editing process, and Steve's going to edit exactly the same photo, and then once we've edited them, we're going to have a call and we're going to compare our edits, not to see who's best, obviously that'll be me, no, but basically just to compare our editing styles and just see our different thought processes when we're editing this image. So let's jump straight into it. I've already made the basic edits for this particular photo, adjusting the exposures to how I want them to be for the highlights and the shadows. This photo was made up of 2 image files, one for the shadows and one for the highlights, because it was a really bright afternoon, and as you can see just here, you've got the sun flooding in from the left hand side, lighting down these highlights down here, so it was quite a high contrast scene. So I've done the basic edit already, got the shadows pretty much where I want them to be, and the highlights pretty much where I want them to be. If you are interested in how I've actually edited these, let me know in the comments below, and yeah, I might do a separate video about sort of the more basic editing. But what I really wanted to talk about in this video was how I take it from this base edit to something that I would consider to be pretty much a finished photo. The photo itself was taken in mid-autumn in the Lake District, and as you can see, you've got some lovely colours in this tree over here. I think it may be a silver birch, and then some lovely colour here where the sun's coming through and kissing the side of these trees. And obviously you've got this beautiful green moss on the trees and the rocks and on the roof of the hut here. So I really want to enhance these warm colours of the autumn colours here in the trees. So to start off with, what I'm going to do is adjust the white balance of the image slightly. So I'm going to bring up on the right hand side here the warmth of the image ever so slightly until I start to see those colours pop. If I go too far, it will completely ruin it, but if I just put it around about here, I really quite like that. It's added a nice touch of warmth to the scene and really brought out those orange colours. So yeah, happy with that. I have just noticed as well on the histogram, we are crushing some of the shadows here. So I might just bring up some of the shadows ever so slightly and bring up the blacks ever so slightly as well. Okay, happy with that. We've got quite a nice flat image now to work with. So now I've got that basic exposure, I can really start to bring that photo to exactly how I wanted it to be in the field. So with my images, I absolutely love painterly looking images. And one of the ways that I achieve that is by playing about with the tone curves, introducing a bit of an S curve as well to give it a bit of contrast. So in Lightroom, if I come over to the right hand side here, you've got this section here called the tone curve, and just to very quickly explain how this works, on the bottom left hand side here you've got the adjustment for the darkest elements of the scene. On the top right, you've got the brightest elements of the scene. In between, right in the middle, you've got the mid-tones. On the left hand side of that you've got the shadows, and on the right hand side of that you've got the highlights. Now in a lot of my images where I do go for that painterly look, I like to set the black so there's no real true blacks in the scene, to give it that sort of matte look where the blacks are just not quite black. That just gives it a nice sort of ethereal feel. So I'm going to bring up this little pointer here on the right hand side up to a point where the blacks aren't quite black, but they're not too washed out like that. So I'll bring it down a little bit to probably about there. And then I'll bring down the shadows to a point where I feel the shadows are just right for the image. So probably about there. Now what you'll notice with this is it does look now really quite washed out, but we can introduce a bit more contrast by raising the highlights on this and introducing an S-curve into the scene. So on the right hand side here, you've got the highlights column. If I just put another spot there and drag that up, you'll see the contrast starts to come back in. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that just there. And now I'm going to play about with the midtones just to add, a little bit more contrast into the scene. So putting a pointer in the middle there, I can bring that down or up, depending on the scene, to taste. So I'm thinking probably about there. So already with those minor adjustments, that's very slight S-curve. If I turn that on and off, you can see it's made a significant difference to the image. So if I hold this here and turn that off, you can see it's very, very contrasty. And if I release that, it's just softened the image ever so slightly. It adds a really nice ethereal look to the scene. Next, I want to deal with these highlights here on the right hand side because they really are quite distracting. So basically the sun was coming in from the left hand side and lighting up this valley here with these trees, but because they're such a bright highlight, my eyes are drawn immediately to it. So the easy way I'm going to deal with that is by using a brush. So on the right hand side here, you've got the masking tools. If I select that and choose the brush option, you can also press the letter K on the keyboard and that'll bring that up. But by getting the brush here, I can then just paint over, quite loosely to be honest with you, over that section there. And what I can do now is bring those highlights down in this section on the right hand side. So I'll bring that down to a point where I'm quite happy with it and probably drop the saturation as well. So if I drop that down a little bit and also maybe bring the exposure down just a touch. Okay, that'll be a little bit less distracting. Now at the moment, I'm sure you'll agree that looks pretty horrendous because it's dark. It's darkened down everything on that side of the image that's been selected. So we need to refine that mask. Now the way we refine that mask is under the paintbrush, you've got a little minus sign, which basically when you hover over it says subtract from mask. If I select that and go down to luminance range, I get this little pen eyedropper thing here. If I hover that over one of the highlights of that part that we were trying to mask out and just click, what you'll see is actually excluded that from the mask, so it's left everything dark. The easy way to fix that is basically to invert the mask that we've created. It's very, very simple to do. On the right hand side here, you've got an invert button. If you click on invert, that'll basically invert that mask and it's only working on the highlights. Now, if I zoom in on that particular section of the image, you'll see it looks quite horrible. It's actually left some ghosting around here, so it's not quite a good looking blend, if you like. So we can fix that quite easily. So on the right hand side here, you've got the selected luminance range in this box, and then you've got the lower fall off selector here, which if you raise it up and down, it really chooses how smoothly that blend actually happens. So if I bring that down, it makes it a lot smoother, and you do get rid of those halos that were occurring, but it makes it look very, very flat. So if I bring that up to a point where it looks okay and you ain't got too much of a halo, but probably about there, and then maybe adjust the actual box for the selected luminance threshold here to a point that looks kind of natural, and then bring up the fall off again, probably about there. If I zoom back out, you'll see it's a lot less jarring than it was before. Those highlights have just been calmed down a bit, so my eyes aren't immediately drawn to that right hand side of the image. So I'm quite happy with how that looks now. We can close this this filter off. If I scroll down to the bottom right hand corner and click close, and yeah, we can start to do a bit more work to the image. So one of the things I'll do now, and I use these quite a lot, is I play around with the HSL sliders. So there are some quite strong greens in the image, especially on the rocks and on the roof of this hut here. So I'm going to get around that quite easily by playing around with the HSL sliders. You can find that under the color mixer section of Lightroom here. And basically HSL means hue, saturation and luminance. If I go onto the hue section here, that will adjust the balance really between true green to a sort of yellowy tone. So on the green section here, if I bring this to the left, it will bring those greens to more of a yellowy sort of color. If I go too far, it looks horrendous. But if I bring it back a bit, so it almost looks green, but not quite, it just looks more pleasing to the eye to me, so I'm quite happy with that. Now I'm going to play with the yellows a bit and try and bring out some of these colours of the trees here. So I'll bring the yellows down a bit, maybe towards the orange, just to really make those orange colours pop a bit. That looks really quite nice. And then with the oranges, I'll have a play with those as well. If I go to the left, it makes them more reddy. If I bring them to the right, it makes them more yellow. So I might just leave those as they were. I'm quite happy with the balance of those oranges there. And then we can start to play with the saturation. So next to hue, you click on saturation, and you can bring up the saturation of the oranges if you wish. Probably about there. And same with the yellows. You can probably enhance those a little bit. Probably about there. I'm quite happy with that. And then with the greens, should bring those up and down. Probably leave them like they were actually. Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's not bad at all. So happy with the colours where we are. I would like to bring some more emphasis to the actual hut itself though. It's got some lovely texture and detail to it. Being a really old building made of this, local slate, I really want to bring attention to that. So the easiest way for me to do that is to utilise another mask. So if I click on the plus sign at the top here and then go to select subject, it should set a nice mask on the actual hut, which it's done a pretty good job, to be honest with you. So what I'll do, I'll go down in the mask and play about with these clarity and texture sliders. So as I say, I love that texture in the slate there, so I'm going to bring up the texture a bit and see if we can enhance that a little bit. Don't want to go too far because it looks far too HDR looking. It's too much pop there. So I just want to be really subtle with this and probably bring it to about there. And that's just brightening up some of those lower highlights and darkening some of those shadows to make those textures pop. You can also have a play with the clarity, but just be very careful with the clarity because you can really go too far with that. So I'll bring it up ever so slightly, I think. Probably about there. Drop the texture again a bit. It's gone a bit too crunchy looking. Yeah, I'm happy with that. That looks really good. So that's just made that building just pop a little bit and make it part of the scene. So yeah, I'm good with that. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a bit of a darkening at the bottom, a bit of a vignette if you like, just to keep your eyes away from the bottom here. It's a bit of a distraction with this grass going through. So I don't tend to use the vignette slider in Lightroom very often. What I would do is I'll actually grab a mask again, choose a linear gradient, and then I can choose exactly where that vignette sits and how strong each corner is depending on the scene. So I can just basically draw that on there, scroll up, drop the exposure. You can be quite heavy-handed at this point, just to get the right angle for the vignette. Now obviously that's really too strong at the moment, so I'm going to bring this down, just drag it out the way a bit, probably to about there, and then probably increase the exposure ever so slightly because it is a bit too strong at the minute. So probably about there. That looks quite nice. And then I'm going to draw another one on the right hand side here just to keep your eyes coming in towards the tree and the actual building. So I'll just add another linear filtered, drag that across, drop the exposure down. Again, very strong. Just adjust the angle of where I want that to sit and bring it back a bit. Probably about there. I might adjust the angle again. Probably about there. That's quite good. And again, increase the exposure slightly. So that's just really helping to draw the eye away from these corners towards the building and this beautiful oak tree here. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that now. So what I'm going to do now is going to take this photo into Photoshop and play about with some dodging and burning just to bring out some details and also remove a couple of little distractions in the scene. So to do that, I just right click on the photo, go to editing, and then go to edit in Photoshop 2024. Okay, we're now in Photoshop. So first things first, I want to get rid of some distractions, as I say. In fact, there's only really one distraction that's bothering me at the moment, and that's down the bottom left-hand corner down here. There's basically, if I just zoom in here, it looks to me like it's a bit of mud or something, but for some reason it's just drawing my eye to that bottom left-hand corner, so I want to fix that. A very quick way to fix that is to use the remove tool in Photoshop. So here on the left hand side, select that, zoom into the area that you want to remove, get a suitable size brush. You don't want to go too big with this because you can get kind of repeating patterns. So something about that size should do, and just draw over the bit that you want to remove. You don't have to be too careful. It does quite a good job of working it out, but that should do. Yeah, it's not done a particularly great job of that. It's gone quite dark, but you just draw back over it again. Yeah, that's fine. We'll do with that. Okay. So now I'm happy with how that's been cleaned up. Now what I'm going to do is start to work on some dodging and burning. So there are various different tools you can use to use this. I use an application called Pro Panel. Haven't seen many landscape photographers use this. A lot of them use things like Limenzia, TK Actions. There's various different ones out there, but I've been using this one for a while. I can't remember what I paid for it. It wasn't a lot, but it comes with some really cool features and some really good, interesting filters and effects that you can apply to your images. So I'm going to take a look at this now. On this tool tab here, you can set luminosity mask, which I will quite often use for things like dodging and burning. You can also go to filters here, as I say. You've got things like adding an autumn effect, adding a lux effect, which gives it a real nice bit of contrast to the image. But for now, what I'm just going to do is come over to the right hand side here, and where it says add an adjustment, go down to DB soft light, so dodge and burn soft light. Select that, and that will actually create for me a dodge and burn layer at the bottom right hand side here. So I can just simply go over to the left hand side and select a brush, increase the size of that ever so slightly, and yeah, with dodging and burning you can set your blacks or you can set your whites. So your blacks will obviously darken the image, and your whites will basically brighten up the part of the image that you want to brighten up. Now I really want to bring out some emphasis on this hut here. So what I'm going to start by doing is probably darkening down this side ever so slightly, and maybe bringing this side up a bit just to give it a bit more pop. So first things first, I'm going to make sure I'm set to black. As you can see here, take a brush of a reasonable size and set the opacity. I'm going to leave it at 100 for now, because we can always adjust that later on, and then just basically paint over the areas that you want to darken down. We'll do this quite quickly here for the purposes of this tutorial. And you can see it's really quite dark, too dark. It looks absolutely horrible. But I just want to make sure I get this side selected in a pretty reasonable way. Now at the moment you can see that's absolutely horrible. But we can dial that back. So using the opacity slider on the right hand side here, just drop that down to something that looks a bit more in keeping with the image. So 15% maybe, just adds a touch of darkness. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Then we can select the base layer again and do another dodge and burn layer. Good practice would be to rename these layers. So if I right click, if I double click on the one that I created there, I can call that darks. Select the layer again and go back up to the top, add an adjustment, DB soft light, and we'll give this one a name as well, call it lights, just so you know which one's which. In this case we're going to change the paintbrush to white. We'll leave it at 100%, and we're going to paint over this side of the building here just to bring out some extra light to the image. Again, I'm going to do it really quick for the purposes of this exercise. Normally I'd spend a lot more time on this. Just paint over that all the way. Okay, so look, at the moment that was absolutely horrible. But we're going to dial that back again, so back onto the opacity slider, bring that down, say maybe 15% again, and zoom out. Okay, and we'll turn that off and turn it on. Yeah, that's probably a bit too much still, so I'm going to drop that further still. Let's go for about 9%. Yeah, it's just added a little bit of extra light to the side of the hut there. Okay, now what I'd also like to do is try and bring some more attention to the tree over here. So we can do exactly the same thing. Again, using this lights selection. Zoom in a bit. We'll go for a smaller brush this time. And just where the highlights are on the tree, really carefully, just paint a bit of extra light where the light is kissing the side of the tree here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to do a bit more on this moss here, just lighten up a little bit. So that will probably do for the highlights. If I just turn that off and on again, if you pay attention to the tree over here, it's really made those highlights just pop a little bit. Same for the roof as well. So I'm really happy with that now. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to flatten that layer. So if I do Control Shift and E, that'll take all those 3 layers and put them into one. And I just want to show you one other thing with this Pro Panel tool here. So it is quite a sort of ethereal looking scene. So I think it might benefit from maybe using a touch of Autumn Effect. Now, there are various different ways to apply Autumn Effect. The easiest way for me is using this Pro Panel tool. So if I go to the Filters section here and go down to Autumn, it's going to ask me what radius I want the Gaussian blur to be. So it's currently set to 60. The general rule of thumb is to set that to around what your camera's megapixels are. So I'm using the Sony a7R III. So if I set that to around 42, click OK, and that's going to apply the Autumn Effect for me. It comes up with a levels screen here. I never really touch it. Just click OK on that. And if I turn that off and on, it's quite subtle, but it makes a significant difference to the scene. I think that's actually a bit too strong, if I'm completely honest with you. You can mask out certain areas if you want to on the right hand side here, but I'm going to apply this across the whole scene. So I'm going to enable that, but I'm going to drop the opacity down of this layer probably to around 8%. So it's very, very subtle, but it's just giving that slightly dreamy look to the image. And then one last thing, I'm going to go back to this main base layer here, and I'm going to apply what they call a lux filter, which adds a bit more punch to the scene. So click that button there, and immediately you can see it made a very significant difference to the scene. So if I turn that off and turn it on, it just adds that extra bit of punch. I can dial that back, or I can give it a bit more strength if I so wish. So it's currently set to 70%. If I increase that to 100%, it's a bit much. It just looks a bit crunchy. So if I bring that down, yeah, maybe to 70%, about there. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Just really makes those colours pop really quite nicely. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this. There's just one last thing I want to show you. For that, we need to jump back into Lightroom. Okay, so just before we do anything else, I just want to show you the difference between the image before we took it into Lightroom and made those changes and brought it back. So this one here, this is before we took it into Lightroom, this is after. So you can see it's really brought out those colors and really makes it pop. So one last thing I wanted to try with this is I'm going to grab a radial filter here on the right hand side, and I'm going to draw a massive radial filter straight across the scene coming from the left hand side here. So you see the sun is kind of just out of frame to the left here. So I'm going to place that probably about the center of that, probably about there, and I'm going to adjust the angle so it's as if the sun's beaming across this way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just try and add a touch of negative dehaze in here. So if I scroll down to negative dehaze and drop that down ever so slightly, it just brightens up that side of the scene quite nicely. I'm going to go quite strong with this, to be honest with you. I'm going to drop it to maybe about 24%. But what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to just add a touch of warmth to it. So drop that, increase that ever so slightly. Probably about there. I feel that the haze is probably a little bit too strong, so I'm going to come back down and just increase that slightly. Probably to about -12. And yeah. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this, but there's just one thing I want to make sure that I do, which is make sure that the negative dehaze here and this light flooding through that I've added isn't interacting too much with the darkest of the shadows. So to do that, back on the right hand side here, underneath the radial filter, click on the Subtract from Mask button, and then go to Luminance Range. And then you'll get the pen icon here, and if I just go over to one of the darker areas of the scene, probably this roof tile here, and select that with the pen dropper tool, and that's quite nice. And you can see on the mask, if you look really carefully, it's only selected sort of the brighter areas of the scene. And if I just use this button here to check the before and after, so that was before I added the dehaze, and that's after. So it's added that really nice warm glow to the scene. So yeah, generally speaking, I'm quite happy with that. Normally speaking, I'd spend a lot more time and be a lot more careful with my edit, but for the purposes of this video, I wanted to keep it nice and short and sweet. And yeah, hopefully you took some useful tips from it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give Steve a call, and we're going to compare our edits. Right, so I've just given Steve a call, and we're going to compare our images. Remember that we've both taken exactly the same, or both been given exactly the same photo to edit. It's really interesting to see a comparison on how we both saw the image and the editing processes that we took. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Steve first, if Steve wants to share his image and explain his editing process, and we'll have a discussion about it.
Well, I was hoping that you were going to do yours first. No, that's no problem. Okay, so let me show you the image, the final edited shot. So yeah, the initial thoughts were is that them highlights on that right hand side and whether to actually crop them out or not. And obviously that's what I've done. I've gone and cropped out sort of 3/4 of them, and then done a little bit of generative fill in the top there just to fill the highlights back in, to be honest. And then what I've actually done then is sent it into Lightroom, done a little bit of softening, bring it back into Photoshop, then back into Lightroom, done some local adjustments, tried to bring out them nice autumn colours in the background of the building there.
Mm-hmm.
Direct the viewer's eye towards that building by brightening it up a little bit with a bit of a circular grad. I've darkened that right hand side down a little bit and tried to just darken the highlights down a little bit on that right hand side as well, just to draw yourself into that left hand side of the image. And then just a little bit of color grading, really. But I think the main thing for me was getting rid of them highlighted areas in the top there. Whether to use, the decision was whether to use them or not.
Yeah.
And I've obviously decided not to use them. The only thing it did do is, if you look on the left-hand middle side of the image, is that stump is quite close to the edge, and it's just a little bit frustrating. But that was the compromise, I suppose. That's the bit that got me.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it, really.
You play about.
What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's really, really nice. Did you play much about with any of the sort of HSL sliders or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of, like I say, a bit of colour grading, bit of dropping down saturation, bringing up saturation in different areas, and darkening some of the colours, things like that. Mm-hmm. Try to sort of control them greens a little bit so they're not too in your face. Yeah. But like I say, bring out them nice yellows in that tree in the background there, which I actually that draws your eye into it, to be honest. For me, the eye goes to the building, and then into the background, autumn leaves. So really I tried to bring that out in the image, to be honest.
Yeah, I like how you brought the sort of yellows and the oranges out in the trees behind it. Just obviously this is taking.
Like I said, the problem is with bringing all the yellows out is those yellows on the right hand side. It was obviously making them pop as well, doing it as a single colour. So what I did as well was put, if I remember right, was put a little grad over it, a little circular grad over that left-hand tree in the background there, and just made them colours pop that little bit more. Yeah. And then a little bit of colour grading, sort of adding a little bit of blue cast to the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So you get that nice warmth and cold going on, if you like.
Nice.
And that was it, really.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you had similar issues to me on the right hand side with those highlights on the trees that are getting caught by the sort of dropping sun. I went around that a slightly different way, but I'll show you that in a short while. But I do like what you've done in the top left hand corner with the generative fill. It's done a really good job, actually. I didn't do that. I left it as it was, left the top of that peak there, Castle Crag, I think it's called.
Yes.
But I didn't really do a lot with the highlights because there wasn't a lot of detail in the sky, even though it was a HDR file. That the sky was just, there wasn't anything to it, was there?
No, well, that's probably why I decided to crop it out, because I did have a look at it, and it was just a blue sky, basically, wasn't it? There was no detail. Even, it was just it was just a blue sky. It wasn't adding anything. It was just drawing your eye back out for me. It was a shame really, because that crag, it's got a nice flat top to it. It's quite a unique sort of looking mountain top, isn't it? So it's a shame we couldn't incorporate it, or I didn't incorporate it, but I just felt that I needed to get rid of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I toyed with the idea myself, if I'm honest.
Yeah. It was one of the, I started and I just couldn't make my mind up. And I don't know about you, is when we've done this challenge, I'm thinking, what's Martin done? What's Martin done? I'm looking at the image now, because I processed this a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
I think I would have probably tried to, them highlights on the right hand side, but probably try to even sort of get rid of those highlights a little bit more. It's not too bad, because your eye does travel through. It goes from the left and then it goes to the right, which is not, it's not a bad thing, because you can see all them details in the trees there. But
yeah, and it's not too bad as well, because the highlights there do balance with the highlights on the trees on the left hand side a bit as well. So it's not too bad actually.
No, if anything, it can help it by following your eye back through. At least it's like on a nice plane, if you like, where it draws your eye back through. And because there's a lot of interest on that right hand side, you don't want to dismiss that interest, because it's quite nice.
Exactly.
So yeah, I suppose it's and then I obviously cropped it 16:9, just really to get rid of that sky.
Yeah, I actually left it as it's a good point you mentioned that, because I actually left the crop as it was. I didn't adjust the crop at all, but now I'm looking at this, a 16:9 actually really does work in this photo.
Well, I've got to be honest with you, Martin. Obviously we were there both at the same time, and I've obviously took a similar shot to this, and it was 3 or 4 months since I edited the shot. I probably edited it in a similar way, where I've cropped that sky out a little bit, and I can remember actually trying to bring them autumn leaves out as well. So it's probably just more of a, if you like, a muscle memory of how I've edited it, to be honest.
Nice. It works. Love it.
Yeah, so it's good.
I like
the image.
Yeah,
right.
I like the way you darken the foreground as well, because I noticed that was when I was editing mine, the foreground, that grass there, which hasn't really got any real interest in it, was a bit bright, and I just found my eye was immediately being drawn to that bottom all the time.
Yeah, I've put I've darkened the bottom. I've done sort of a painted vignette round it, but I wanted to keep almost that little bit of a highlight of the pathing. Yeah, just to draw you through as well. Draw you into that left-hand side more, and then follow the image round, if you like. Yeah. That was the plan with that, and then just give the actual building a little bit more punch and contrast, really. So. Yeah,
looks good. I like it. It really does draw your eye into that hut, building, house thing, whatever it is.
yeah. It's a quite photogenic building, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, being industries, obviously, it's all made out of what I presume to be slate as well. So it really is a photo of the area.
Yeah.
I really like it. No, well done.
So we have a look at yours then.
Yeah, let me share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
amazing, isn't it? Amazing how we
it's like quite a different approach, to be honest with you. So as I mentioned, I have left the sky in, and it's not blown out, but it almost looks blown out.
Yeah.
So what I actually did with that is, so starting off, obviously got all the basic adjustments right, shadows, highlights, etc. But after that, I wanted to work on really sort of impacting some style to the photo. So what I did at first, basically I adjusted the white balance of the image slightly more towards the warm tones, because I remember standing there, obviously the sun was dropping quite low in the sky at that point, getting towards the end of the day. So I really wanted to try and sort of enhance that. But by also adjusting the white balance more towards the warms, it also brought out some of the actual colour in the autumn leaves as well.
Yeah. I do like that, with that wider shot, let's say. I do like them autumn colours that you've managed to bring out, especially on that crag there, the beautiful autumn colours, but also intertwined with all the branches as well. It's actually quite nice. I like it.
I did also I took it into Photoshop as well. Applied a touch, and I mean really just a very small touch of autumn effect to it, so just to give it that slight sort of mystical look.
Yeah.
And down the bottom sort of left hand corner, there was just one little tiny patch of, I think it was mud or something, but it had a bit of a bright highlight on it. So I used the spot removal tool to get rid of that because my eye was being drawn to that. And also the highlights on the right hand side that we were talking about a moment ago, I used the brush in Lightroom to paint over that, basically desaturated it ever so slightly, or quite a bit actually. And reduce the highlights. But then what I did is with that brush, I then used a sort of a luminosity mask within Lightroom just to make sure it was only affecting the highlights of that part of the photo.
You know, when you've done the autumn effect, have you got a some sort of plugin that you use, or do you do your own sort of style on the autumn?
So I ages ago I bought a plugin called Pro Panel by John Weatherby. It's very similar to sort of TK Actions and Lumenzia. I use that for things like a luminosity mask, that kind of stuff. But it has some built-in kind of effects as well. So within a couple of clicks, you can basically set an autumn effect, and then you can, with that layer, you can adjust the opacity of how much you really want to apply to the image. So I only used about, I think it's about 9% of an autumn effect on this.
Have you got control on the area of the image you can use it on? Is it a local adjustment as well, or is it just adjust the total image?
Yeah, so when you do this, it actually creates a layer with its own layer mask, so you can paint out exactly what you want to include and what you don't want to include. So it's a really, really good piece of kit, actually.
Yeah, it's, to be honest with you, it's something that I just tend to do it myself, if you know what I mean, and then just put my own autumn effect on it, if you like.
Yeah,
and do it that way. But I do like. I know on mine, when I was talking about that stump close to that left hand side, I like how it's got more breathing space on that left hand side. That's another thing that I quite like. But I actually love the way you process the colours and everything. To be honest, it's really, really nice.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned in one of our podcasts recently, I have an aversion to the color green. I don't like photos where the greens are really, really in your face. So I did my typical trick of taking the greens and just pushing them more towards the yellows with the HSL sliders.
Yeah.
Just adds to that sort of warm feeling in the image, I find. And then I did my other little trick that I like to do, which is play around with the tone curves. So introduce a bit of an S curve in the image. Again, matting out the black, so there's no real true black in the image, just to give it that.
Just bringing up that black side on the Instagram. Yeah.
And then I did a little bit of dodging and burning on the hut itself. So I just brightened up the roof where the moss is ever so slightly. Darkened down the right-hand side of the building and lightened up the left-hand side of the building, just to give it a bit more, make it a little bit more three-dimensional looking.
Yes, yeah. I may have, I did similar. I did similar. I just probably tried, because if you have a look at it, the light is catching that door as well. So I just emphasize that a little bit because I quite like that. But giving it that 3D by creating more of a shadow and more of light on one side does really work. And then, like say, that nice green moss on the roof itself, which was, because of its vibrant colours, was quite punchy anyway. If anything, you sort of had to bring it out but calm it down, and the same, calm the colours down but bring the brightness of it out, if you like. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Having looked at your image as well, what you mentioned about that you brightened up the highlights on the door, having a look at this now, I wish I'd done the same. So you're absolutely right. There is a touch of highlight there, and I think that would have really, really stood out quite nicely.
It's funny because I quite like yours. What I was going to say is I may have overdone it slightly, but I did notice obviously some reflective light that's hitting the door there. So and you can see it in your image, but I think yours is a more subtle one, which probably works a little bit better. Maybe an in between of the two that would work. Yeah. But I do like that. I know it's quite busy on that right hand side, but within all them branches and all that busyness, it's some beautiful colours that you've brought out of autumn. More autumny colours. It looks fantastic, to be honest with you. I think it's made the image more interesting, the complete image.
I think really that came from two things. That came from adjusting the white balance more towards the warm colors, but then also, as I say, playing with the HSL sliders. So yeah, adjusting the hue of those oranges more towards a slightly sort of reddy color, and with the yellows bringing them more towards a slightly orangey color as well. But then just adjusting the saturation ever so slightly,
Yeah.
just to really help them pop a little bit. Another thing I did as well, I forgot to mention, when I was dodging and burning as well. The trees, I don't know what trees they are. There might be a silver birch. I'm not sure. But on the right hand side, the highlights that are kissing the side of the tree,
Yes.
I've also brought those up a little bit as well, just because
Yeah.
they really helped sort of anchor that side of the image, I thought.
Yeah. What's your dodge and burn process? Do you do that in Lightroom or Photoshop?
Depends on what day of the week it is.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
No, this one was in Photoshop, so using that Pro Panel tool,
Yeah.
you just press a couple of buttons and it gives you basically a dodge and burn layer. And then
Yeah.
what I actually did with this, when I did my dodging and burning, is I actually left the opacity on the layer at 100%. So during the actual editing process, it looked horrendous. So like the blacks looked completely crushed, the whites looked, completely overexposed. But then once I'd painted over the bits that I wanted to dodge and burn, I then just dropped the percentages of the opacity of that layer to a point where it looked quite nice in the image.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of doing a lot of processing. Is sort of push them sliders up a little bit more than what you like, so you can actually see where you're working.
Yeah.
And then drop that density down, if you like. And I do that quite often. I know when because I've got Lumina as well, as they've got a good dodge and burn tool, but I tend to just do it, probably because I'm lazy, just to brush select and just up the exposure or drop the exposure and just.
But to be honest with you, within Lightroom now, it makes it so easy to do it. So yeah, I mean, I only really did it in Photoshop this time because I was already in Photoshop.
Yes. Yeah. It's just not being idle, just using them. You can use them tools either way, don't you? And you do get used to your own. It's not just your style, your own, the way you go about the image. I mean, I do very little in Photoshop, and I do not, especially nowadays. Lightroom, it does so much. And that was the other question: do you really need these plug-in layer masks in Photoshop now? Now Lightroom is so good because it can select so many, the highlighted colors. You can literally fine tune the color to just select just so little detail, but me in control of the whole image, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the more and more that Lightroom gets updates over the years, these sort of panels and even Photoshop itself are becoming less and less needed. I'm finding that I am using Photoshop a lot less than I used to. But when it comes to things like, I much prefer the spot removal tool in Photoshop.
Yeah, it's any remove, generative fill and all that. That's what I use Lightroom for, really. It's just to get rid of all them little imperfections and the generative fill, and like I say, that so where the mountain comes down and meets the mountain from behind there in my image, that you could still see that. And it was one of the reasons why I chose that crop. If that hadn't worked in generative fill, I wouldn't have been able to actually. I would have probably not chosen that aspect ratio and gone back to the original like you have. But it done such a good job of filling the highlights in.
Yeah.
Where 6 months, a year ago, it'd have been a lot harder work to do that. So it's sort of leveled the playing field, that has, hasn't it? Because yes, I could have done that 6 months ago, but it would have literally taken me an hour longer to do it, where literally it's in seconds. So
you don't necessarily need the technical skill that you would have needed sort of even 3 years ago compared to now. You can be a really great photographer and have a really good eye for a photo, but when it comes to the editing, if you don't have that technical knowledge, I think that was maybe in the past a bit of a blocker. Whereas now you don't necessarily need that technical level of skill. You're absolutely right. It levels the playing field.
Yeah. I think that's why I've done my Your Raw, because I wanted people to just help them on the way, because you can almost tell that they've got a better image there if they know how to process it better, if you like.
Yeah.
And it is part of it. It's part of the. I mean, when we're taking images, you've already processing it while you're taking the image, aren't you? You know,
Yeah.
you literally, it's it's part of standing in the right place, using the right focal, and then you're thinking about, well, how can I process this image? How can it work for me? You know.
Yeah.
So it's all extremely important in my eyes. It is anyway.
No, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, as you become better at photography, you do start to edit in the field. I find, there'll be numerous times I'll be there, frame up a composition, thinking, okay, that composition's great. Now, what would I want to do when I get back on the PC to edit this? And that just I think comes with experience.
Yeah, and you're unconsciously doing it now. I don't know about you, but you literally, it's just another thought process when taking that image. It literally is, right, I can do this, I can work with that, I can remove that, I can, soften that background, or it's whatever you want to do. So yeah. I'm so glad as well that we've put this on Thumbs Up Photography on the Facebook, and thank you everybody for voting, but that chose this image, because it's the one I wanted to process, to be honest.
I wanted to process the boat.
No, I wanted this one because I was quite interested, like I say, because I'd shot a similar shot to this myself, and I've already edited that one. I wanted to have another go at it, if you like, but I was actually interested to see what your procedure was and how you edited yours. Really, that's why I was interested.
Same with you. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting how we've gone for pretty much a similar sort of color sort of science, if you like, within the photo, but we've gone for a very different sort of idea on how we want to draw the viewer's eye in the image.
Yes,
with the highlighters and stuff. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
But that's all down to that crop, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
pretty much. You work with the crop. So I mean, the first thing I did was, I'm thinking about the crop. That's the first adjustment, is the crop.
Yeah.
Am I going to crop it? And then work from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I didn't really bother with the crop, because obviously when I took this image, that was the crop that I wanted, and I was quite happy with that, where that stood. But yeah, I do like what you've done with yours. I do love the fact that you've got rid of those highlights in the top left-hand corner. I think that was a really good idea, actually.
It was intriguing to me, as if you'd done that or hadn't done that. I suppose it'd be nice to swap it around, actually, and you work on a crop, and then, because the crop is massive. It's massive in any image. It's massive. How it works, how the image flows, how it's balanced. So it's probably, I would advise anybody, the first thing is even when you're taking that image, think about the crop. And when you get it back, okay, let's think. Probably the biggest improvement in an image is how you crop that image.
Yeah,
it's massive, and I think it shows it. It's really good that it shows it in this image, and then working from there. But yeah, it's good. That is, enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, just to echo what Steve said as well. Yeah, thanks to everyone on the Thumbs Up Photography group for voting on this image. Yeah, it's been a very, very interesting exercise, and I think we'll do it again sometime, Steve, as well. Definitely.
Yeah.
Or maybe, or maybe get the group to submit their own image for both of us.
Yeah.
That might be an idea. So
yeah, that would be good, because it'd be something that it's a total fresh sort of base start. Yeah. And that'd be good. That would. Yeah, we'll have to do that. Definitely, good idea.
Sounds good. I think it's probably a good time to end it. So yeah, just want to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found some interesting tips and ideas from both looking at with mine and Steve's photos. Go and check out Steve's video as well. And yeah, that's it. So thank you for watching. See you soon.
Yeah, I would whatever Martin said. Thanks for watching.